Hey everyone, Internet Vicious book reader here. Today I want to talk about Freedom is a Constant Struggle by Angela Y. Davis. Angela Davis is one of the most known activists in the world. Her work as an activist has helped the cause of freedom and liberation not only in the US soil but even further. She has done so much that not only the president known the most for being a dumbass named Ronald Reagan has ran free in his head, but she was even placed on the FBI 10 most wanted fugitive when the FBI is under the direction of known douchebag all around J. Edgar Hoover. In perhaps one of the most badass moments in the history, on January 5, 1971, she went to the trial raising her fist and then announced her innocence. She was imprisoned even with lack or more specifically no evidence whatsoever that a movement to free her from prison was started, a movement that involved names like Rolling Stone, John Lennon, and Yoko Ono. And this book is a collection of her speeches and her interview that contain so many wisdom. She opens with talking about how change is not made by famous figures like her or Martin Luther King Jr. or even someone like Nelson Mandela, who everyone agrees is a heroic figure from South Africa. It's not the only sole reason why change is made. They're just part of a collective sound that demanded justice from their world, and that demand is so huge that it cannot be done by any one person. If there's anyone that said otherwise, it's just a trick for people to believe the myth of individual excellence, an exaggerated reality, a fantasy, so they can minimize the size and strength of its movement. It can also make people make the mistake that change and ending injustice is about taking down the bad guy. If we don't take seriously the ways in which racism is embedded in structures of institutions, if we assume that there must be an identifiable racist who is the perpetrator, then we won't ever succeed in eradicating racism. Since it's never actually about individuals, but more about collective ideas, then there's also the myth that feminism is still just about women, for women and by women, which is again not true at all. We have to extricate ourselves from narrow identitarian thinking if we want to encourage progressive people to embrace these struggles as their own. With respect to feminist struggles, men will have to do a lot of the important work. I often like to talk about feminism not as something that adheres to bodies, not as something grounded in gendered bodies, but as an approach, as a way of conceptualizing, as a methodology, as a guide to strategize for struggle. That means that feminism doesn't belong to anyone in particular. Feminism is not a unitary phenomenon, so that increasingly there are men who are involved in feminist studies. If you think when people talk about feminism it's only to the benefit of women, then you have only listened to gossip. You need to read more books with knowledge. If you only knew taking down patriarchy as only putting men down to raise women's position in the world, then you've only listened to gossip. Again, you need to read more books with knowledge. And these are not the only misinformation that this small book called out. It also called out the misinformation about the end of slavery, where historically it's been told that white people end slavery in America, which is only partially true. And there's also the many new form of slavery that creative people in America has tried to establish. The current one is the prison industrial complex and the privatization of prison, which is telling on why people wanted to make a business out of prison since it means free labor, it means money. Because all of this involve intersectionality of injustice that the book will dive into. It's how one thing affects another, whether it's directly or indirectly, which is not a new thing we just found out. Martin Luther King has even said on a letter that is quoted in this book. We are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly, affects all indirectly. There are so much you can learn from such a short book. Some of it is very limited to the history of injustice in America because, of course it is, she's American, but there are also a lot of parts that touch on crisis that is on a more global scale. For example, during the interview in the book that's around the end of 2014, which is almost a decade ago, she has foreseen a lot of the events that are ongoing right now. This also involves going more in depth into intersectionality of injustice, where a lot of movements that demand justice for all has so much connective tissue on them, which we can see from how South Africa is the first nation that called out genocide that is happening in Palestine in a very public and very official space. It's not their fellow pan-Arab state that helped them in their time of need, since they have chosen to abandon their neighbor over richness and power. The one that helped them instead is the far South Africa, because there are interconnectivity between the apartheid that South Africa has experienced with the genocide that Palestine are experiencing. The book also mentioned the history of racism towards black people in America, how at one point the Black Panther movement was called out for its violence, and how absurd the call-out is since without the life-threatening racism to black people that a group like the KKK can be considered a powerful group at that time, there would be no need for the Black Panther movement. Again, same as what is happening in Palestine right now, how people call out Hamas violence, ignoring the root of how Hamas came to be, the violence that the Zionists have done through the IDF. The book also called out the involvement of G4S, a private security company, and their atrocity, including torturing and killing a person that they deported, like in the case of Jimmy Mubenga, who they forcefully shoved into the car upholstery by three girls in a ritual they nicknamed carpet karaoke, where the people they forced this are told to sing into the carpet, so they cannot speak out about the atrocity that's been done to them. They hold Jimmy in this position for 40 minutes until he died. The G4S is involved in over 90 countries committing various kinds of crimes like this, including in Palestine. COSATU, the South African Union, has even spoken about their atrocity in handling Palestine prisoners before the current one. She had her finger on the pulse of the world's injustice, and when it is combined with her power of observation and speech, it made her not only capable to see how injustice itself has already been built deep into the system of the institution, but also speak out and give us a better understanding about them. And unlike what a lot of people did when we see that, which is give up, she and her peers choose to not back down, to not give up, to stand up against injustice over and over again, and each time they knocked them down, they got back up knowing that the fight is not over yet. I'm not an activist, I'm just a dumbass that likes to read books and try to make these stupid little videos. I have so much respect for people like the author and everyone like her. They are faced with so much of what feels like insurmountable obstacles, but they try to claim it anyway, despite knowing how difficult it is. Meanwhile, I wouldn't know where to even start. While most people you see might have given up and then they kept saying, "It's been this way for forever, what can you do?" Even to their own children and the next generation, remember that there are people like the author and her peers that ask what can you do, not just to justify giving up, but rely to keep asking what do they can do to make the world a better place. And although freedom is a constant struggle, we can see traces of how their effort had paid off to make a diversity of minorities to finally be treated as fellow human beings. I think it's such a waste if your understanding of social justice is only from online groups since you're missing so much knowledge from some of the coolest people who have ever lived. There's this pessimism that the world cannot be changed to a better world, but if we see the historical struggle of activists, we can see how much the world has changed. There will always be bad people and there will always be ignorant people, but never has it been in history that we know more about bigotry and fascism and the amount of damage it's done, not just to human psyche but our life. And this understanding didn't just come out of nowhere, but because we as a collective agreed to call out bad things as bad when we see them until our understanding of them grew. It is in collectivities that we find a reservoir of hope and optimism. Because even if violence begets violence, it doesn't change the fact that kindness begets kindness. And when we rise a group out of injustice, we'll help rise another group to fight against another injustice. I highly recommend this. I think it's very encouraging reading the work of someone who, unlike a lot of people who make sound on the internet, has not given up to make the world a better place after decades of effort, and as a result has lived to see some of these changes. It's way more motivating than any books written by CEOs desperate to make more money, and way more educational. I give this a 5. What do you think? Are you gonna read it? Did I miss anything? Leave your thoughts in the comment below and subscribe to the channel. That's about it.